going to, as our final part of this opening discussion, talk a little bit about the Black Casebook. It is its own strange vortex of Batman and Batman history that works both outside of the comic book and weirdly inside of the comic book too, because it's a little bit diegetic. Like, it does kind of exist in the comic as a thing in the same way that we can hold it as a document in our hands. It's kind of hard to lay hands on at this point, and it is not reproduced fully in digital. You can't just go buy it digitally. And what it was 12 Golden Age and Silver Age stories of Batman that Morrison, as an author, was saying, I'm going to key into these. But then within the Batman universe, it's also this collection of somewhat strange and unexplained moments in Batman's history that ultimately are a key to a lot of the things that happen in Morrison's run. I'll add two small facts to that, and then we'll go around. We're going to talk about our favorite one each, and then we're going to talk about what we thought was just the strangest, oddest, weirdest one each. The two things that I'll add to this, one is the reminder that even though a lot of us who are Marvel fans think of the Silver Age as starting in 1961, because that's when the Fantastic Four debuted, for DC, the Silver Age was already underway starting with 1956, because most people draw the line for Silver Age in DC as the debut of Wally West as Flash, it's not Wally West, Barry Allen as Flash, and also the renewed origin of Green Lantern. So that was started in 1956. The other thing you have to take into account when you're reading 50s Golden Age stories is The Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wertham. Now, I've had the opportunity to do a little bit of like research and academic work a long, long time ago, if you can call it academics. It was pre-college for me, but I did lay hands on the original book and I got to read a lot of it. And you have to think that a lot of the discussion in that book is about the immorality that's being suggested by comics. All of this murder, all of these people acting in as aberrations, all these people in their tights, the strange relationships between heroes and their sidekicks. And that came out in 1954, and you can absolutely start to see the change in stories starting after that, and especially as the comic code begins to exist. So there's definitely a marked shift in this Black Casebook stuff. Its earliest story in the casebook is from 1951. The latest story in the casebook is from 1964. So they absolutely span those two landmarks. But then I'm not going to go first. I want to hear your favorite story of these 12 casebook stories and why, starting with Harry.
All right, yeah. I just want to preface real quick and say that, what I really loved reading these because somehow I've read these 3 omnibuses. I've read the Grant Morrison run at least 6 times, 7 times.
Whoa!
I
don't think I knew that.
It's one of my favorites.
Even Peter hasn't read that much X-Men. To find out X-Men that many times, probably. Maybe.
But I've never read these Black Casebook books, which are, I did not realize how much stuff just Grant Morrison is taking directly from these books into his new series, either by direct continuity or thematic translation. But the other thing I was really into by reading all of these, which felt like a fever dream last night, but it's really there's so much of these books are about damaging Batman's psyche, about just assaulting him mentally and seeing what happens to this poor man, which is a big part of the Grant Morrison book that we'll get to. Anyway, so my favorite of these books was sorry, let me pull it up real quick. It was the Batman 113, The Superman of Planet X, February 1958. So I'm going to be honest. First of all, I'm being a whole ass nerd where basically this is the planet of Zur and R, which is a huge part of the first act of Batman's. That phrase is a huge part of Grant Morrison's run, so I'm geeking out about that. But also, it's just a really fun book where Batman goes to a different planet and gets Superman-esque powers by a difference in the atmosphere, and he just runs around beating people up and wrecking stuff and just having a great time. And there's this part where he's just I wish Superman could see me right now. He's swinging giant metal beams and stuff, and it was kind of delightful. It was really nice just seeing Batman cut loose and just wreck stuff. But also just it was a huge tie into the Morrison books that I love so much. The weirdest, and I know this is not.
We're not doing the weirdest yet, are we?
We are not.
Not yet.
You don't want to steal all of our thunder. What if your best and weirdest is also all of our best and weirdest?
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough. Riha, you're up.
No, I want to start by saying that the writer for that book, where it's like Seduction of Innocence, if it's a he, right? It's a man who wrote that. Yeah, if if he read recent X-Men comics, he would be running.
It's all come to pass now. Everything.
It's true. It's like extreme.
I was right.
It's like, it's like extreme horniness from top to bottom. So I'm just wanted to say that. So yeah, I mean, it was insanity to read this 12 issues, back to back, like the way I did. And especially not necessarily not knowing where one ends and where one begins, and sometimes it just keeps going on, and I'm like, I don't know where it ends. So
who am I?
Who am I? So the one that Harry picked was actually my second favorite, was my runner-up, because I was like, well, I wish DC things were in continuity. Then someone could at least remind him every time he goes against Superman. Like, hey, remember that time you against Superman? How did it feel? You should know this by now. But the one that I really liked was the first Batman, which number?
Yes.
Number 235.
Man.
That was
I loved it because I was like, oh my God, it's just like, it's like, he finds out about his father being like the first Batman, and I absolutely love Flashpoint. The Flashpoint storyline where it's like Thomas Wayne, the alternate universe, Thomas Wayne, the Batman, and all of that. So I was kind of like, oh, it probably started right here. And then it's it's like such an interesting story. And the fact that it's just like, you were going to be like, oh yeah, he's just going to go up to that person and like, yeah, tell us you did it. And it's like, no, he had the whole amnesia thing and everything. There was like layers and layers of stories, and it just never ended. And I was like, wow, I love this.
I am so excited for you to read the first act of this series. Dear Lord, I was very excited. I really like this issue too. I'm gonna say that.
Yeah, but I also like the design of Batman. It just he kind of did it for the children's comics and stuff like that. And I think the whole I don't know. It just it's really really well done. And I think it's also the one that has a most Bruce Wayne than all the other stories. I didn't see a lot of Bruce Wayne in the other stories, but this one had. But yeah, so this is my favorite.
I'm getting too excited. I gotta go take a walk anyway.
Well, also I think I'll be honest, that was my number one, but I have a backup plan. I think the interesting thing there too is that it means that somebody else really was responsible for Joe Chill killing his parents, and he unravels this whole thing, and it's 12 pages. I'm reading no way. There's no, and this story's from 1956.
It's
so many
there.
Of these other detective comic stories from this era, they're so basic, and they really focus on him as a detective. The whole shtick of these golden age stories in detective comics is it's a solid story, and then in the final panel, the detective says, the reason I was able to figure that out is because they had ultraviolet dust on their shoes. That's how all of the stories work. But this one was so beyond that. The scope of it was so much bigger. It was about Batman. I'm like, wow, in a world that was really before continuity, because there is no, they would reuse characters. Clearly people would recur. There's sometimes they would refer to Catwoman's kind of progress a little bit, but there was no expectation that you had read the prior month and the month before that and the year before that. These were just one-offs. And the amount of weight that story had just really totally blew my mind. The other one I would nominate.
It read so well. It read so well as if it's a modern comics.
Which is a backhanded compliment, right? We're trying to get these golden age comics to give us a feeling that a comic 70 years later is giving us. But it did. It felt very, very modern, and I think that at the time, people probably appreciated that in a different way than we do now. My backup favorite, though, and I can't really fully understand why, but it was Batman 134, The Rainbow Creature. I think because it's so silly and it's sci-fi, but it's broken out of, it's clearly the Silver Age at this point. The panel layouts are different. The way they're talking is different. The hijinks they get into is different. The way they talk about the crazy science is different. And it's funny because it still has a detective element to it where they're figuring out what the creature does thing at a time, but it's gay Godzilla. It's Pride Month Godzilla that they're fighting, which on its own just is a funny image. But I really just liked it because it was one of the times that Batman was silly, but the silliness still felt like it was a Batman story. Where some of the ones in here that didn't work for me is where like the silliness overtakes the Batman part and stops feeling like Batman and just feels like a goofy story you could tell with anybody. But the Rainbow Creature felt like this perfect marriage of like Batman and moving into the Silver Age and kind of post-war, creature feature and also just silliness.
I laughed at one line where it's like, how they can turn into Leaf. They just become two-dimensional. Oh my God! Dimensional!
Which is much sillier than any of the previous Golden Age stuff. Like it was full on Silver Age goofiness. No,
but the thing is, like, it's like, oh, we became two-dimensional, which is, for character to say that is a good thing, right? Like, it's like you're becoming one-dimensional to two. But the thing is, there's two other people who became that, and they're like, oh, don't worry, it will wear off.
And they're like floating around like, no!
Yeah. And then I could not help but think about Green Lantern Rings came from this, probably, because it's the same emotions, and then the ideas and everything. I'm like, you stole it. I'm just kidding.
I bet Jeff Johns. I'll say Jeff Johns did. No, don't lie about that.
Let's try not to. All right, so weirdest, Harry. Weirdest, the one that just struck you as what the F is happening in this comic book?
Okay, I know it's not like the most visually weird, but I really got to give it to Batman 112, which is Am I Really Batman? which is the craziest thing I've ever read. Which the plot is Batman wakes up in costume in the asylum and is just like, what's going on? And they're like, you're a fake Batman. The real Batman and Robin are right over here. And he basically has this crazy adventure where he's trying to prove that he's real. He sleeps in the street. He's just like losing his mind. And it's revealed at the end that he got hit with a depression gas by a villain that will cause him to lose himself. So Robin and Alfred's master plan is to dress up as Batman and Robin and give him a complete mental breakdown for his own goodwill. And they're just going to blow his friggin' mind. And they're just like, yeah, we just kind of messed with you because we thought it'd be good for you. And he's like, thanks, guys. And that's how the issue ends. It's just so crazy. Like, these books are about destroying this man's mind. And this one, more than most, is just like, we wanted to break you as a person for your own good.
There was like a subtle undercurrent there, too, which is that the Ray was supposed to make anybody kill themselves or just die of misery and depression within 24 hours. And so they needed to give him an overwhelming reason to live. And the only thing Robin could think of was... What if he was so angry that he might not be Batman? Like that's what I got from it. Like his will to live purely is being Batman and figuring out stuff. And so Robin was like, what is something that appeals to both of those urges that can't be solved in 24 hours that will just keep his will to live alive? And he's like, I've got it. By gum, I've got it. Great Scott, I've got it.
A problem so shocking he won't rest until he has the answer. And my favorite part is the very last panel. It has them talking to Alfred. And Alfred just got a wife beater on because he just got out of the Batman costume. And that's just like a really nice touch. This book rules.
There's like... If you read the final reveal that, it was Alfred all around, and then if you go back and then see Alfred just standing there like like with the Batman with the Bruce Wayne mask on the whole time. And then also it kind of reminded me of a discussion that we all had about how I dealt with my depression and my constant suicidal thought. Is like, yeah, give her a reason and she will live. Like,
we all gotta pretend to be free, huh? And throw you on the street.
Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, oh, he had a reason. That's why he couldn't just give into it, and he had to keep on going.
And it's just it's the craziest idea, and then it ends with like this era is just like, and all in a day's work in this Batman comic, and it's like you just gave this man a breakdown.
Like every single one of this kind of ended in my head was like, and that's all, folks.
Yeah, like the circle, like the black circle zooms in on you and it cuts to black.
Yeah, exactly.
Freya, what was the weirdest one for you?
I mean, yeah, I think you know which one it's going to be. It's like there's like a skin color tone in the utility belt in the Chief Indian Batman.
God, that's a lot.
That was something.
That's
there was
Batman
like
86.
Yeah, the
That
Batman
is-
86. And then it was, I don't know which year it came out. Like, I think it's somewhere
54.
around 50s. 54. Okay, 54. Hey. So it's still that time when apparently everybody didn't know what on earth they were talking about.
What Red Face was.
Yeah, what red face was, but the thing is, like, it's like a utility belt has it, and then so it's a very standard story where it's like this guy he's like, oh, they shot me because he's like a Native American Batman, and then the like a tribal chief, and then they came and shot him, and like, oh, if I see you in a Batman costume, then we know that it's you. So obviously Bruce Wayne has to go in red face to do and having the chief garb to be Native American Batman. But the whole time they talk about that, oh, it's Indian, and then how apparently Indian horses, and like every time they said that, it was like, arr, arr. Like,
Between this and it's kind of a spoiler, but those two characters show up in Grant Morrison's run and what their situation is and how Batman looks at them in that run. Like, I think he should go to jail. This is too much against
Not just horny
against
jail,
the
where you
people.
already knew that he belongs, but
yeah.
Prison for crimes
but
against people.
No,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, the whole thing was just, and and he's wearing his regular Batman clothes, which you led to think that the Native American Batman is also wearing those clothes, but that's not apparently the thing. And it just like, the thing is, we also kind of accidentally read some extra issues, and one of the other issues where he goes to England, because he's the English Batman, where the stories also end the exact same way. And then you're like, why are you doing the same thing twice? You ran out of ideas. But in that one, he also put on the other people's face and then shows up to the party. And I'm like, what is happening? What is this weird fetish that we're dealing with?
Modern readers often forget that this the power of disguise is absolutely a Batman thing, which Morrison absolutely brings back from what I recall.
Yes, he does.
But a lot of people forget that this was like a key Batman plot point in the Golden Age. The whole face swapping and impersonating, that doesn't make it okay to do red face or black face or any other face that he probably does during the run. But it was very much a Batman trope that he was this master impersonator.
The problem is now I'm thinking that his utility belt has different skin foundation. Like, I'm now thinking that he has it, and I cannot stop thinking about my Marvel ways where not all of these are in continuity. Like, like, as far as I'm concerned, he has those in his utility belt.
My favorite thing with those international hero issues, which is like whenever he goes deal with the international Batman, is whenever he meets up with them, they're always like, "Oh, we're doing our best, but we're not as good as you, Batman, and we never will be." And like sometimes the issues end just being like, "Yeah, we're not as good." And he's like, "Yep," and then it just cuts to credits. Like, they're just very insecure as a team, which actually again comes up later in Grant Morrison's run.
I think like the insecurity. To me, those were the ones that the weirdest. I'm like still trying to choose between three, which is just like how emotionally stunted everyone is around Batman, and like the people that imitate Batman, and like everybody, it's like all about their vulnerability, at least in this particular collection of stories. I mean, the one where Robin breaks his leg and he's afraid that Batman's going to replace him, and he's like so desperate.
It's so
which
crazy.
Also has the best line ever, where he says, "I've got great news for you, Robin," and Robin thinks Batman's doing his best to sound gay, but I can tell his heart isn't in it, which I know. I know gay meant in that context in that time, but it just that battle will live with me forever.
And then while holding a child, like it just
Frederick Wortham was there. He was on it.
My favorite was Robin just going, I saw how Gordon looked at me. He's disappointed, and I have like stress dreams about Gordon, like tossing and turning about just Gordon's eyes staring into his soul.
Well, I told you it's because he later bumped uglies with his daughter. So
that's
it's
true.
like
You don't disappoint Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it came from that.
He's 10 in this or whatever. He doesn't.
Oh, you gross! In that case, I take that back.
But so in trying to decide between them, I had a lot of trouble deciding what was the weirdest. But I think ultimately the one that I was like, what is even happening, was World's Finest 89, the Club of Heroes from 1957. Because it has Batman, it has the International Batman, it has Superman, it has Superman having temporary amnesia, and Batman having to, it's got so many layers, and it just feels like it's trying to do the most. Like, it has, some of these comics had done like a little bit, but this one is just like so far beyond. But it also really shows that whole like Batman Superman camaraderie and Batman understanding Superman's secrets and everything is there. But I don't even know if I fully could explain it. There was a cloud of kryptonite and it was temporarily giving him amnesia. I don't even know if I can fully explain
Because-
it.
While he had amnesia, he became a different hero.
Right, playing off that same thing from the Batman thing, where like his main drive is he has to do good. So even while having amnesia, he's like, I'm still gonna be Superman. It's just such a weird story. And then I thought the whole point of the story was gonna be the whole international Batman, who at that point had occurred a couple of times in the casebook, and they're just useless.
They're all just like, well, Superman should get the top spot. It can't be any of us.
We're not even going to compete for it, really.
The one thing I wanted to say that was actually my third favorite story, because the thing is, Batman figures out why Superman is having his amnesia at the same day every day, because it's like the kryptonite is going around the world and it's showing up in front of Metropolis at the same time every time. I really like that, but everything else, as Peter said, was bonkers. And it's like, what is going on?
Well, and that the actual thing is about the deed to the clubhouse where all these guys get together to hang out as superheroes, even though most of them aren't even from the United States and won't be there most of the time. And like, Bruce Wayne is a millionaire. Like, why does it, the whole overarching plot is like, we can't let this hero we've never met before be a hero and get the deed to this building. That would be the worst.
And they're just like, oh, he's making Superman look like just like a punk bitch. Like, they just keep talking about how Superman looks like trash because he's not rescuing a plane or
he's
whatever.
Not around.
I know, they're like, Superman's just such a loser of it. It's just like the layers of it, really.
There's so much happening.
I also love that the street people are like, Superman is surely going to come and save us. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, it's like, nowadays it's like, whatever, people, Twitter, Facebook.
Well, that story also, I'm pretty sure the person who owns the house is John Mayhew, who also shows up in the first act of the book. It's all here. That's what's blowing my mind. It's like,
I just think it's crazy that you never read it before and that you'd read it for this, and it's like,
I know, like, this is all here.
But isn't it actually a better thing to read the Morrison run and then come and look at it? Because I feel like I was a little lost about like, what's the point of all of this?
The thing, yes, because this is all going to be in the book, and it's all either going to be there wholesale or retwisted to fit a lot of like crazy psyche stuff Morrison's doing. But it's all there. This is all going to come up throughout the books we're going to read.
Right. No, I mean, that's what I was saying.
Well, and plus, the Black Casebook came out really early in the run. It's not like it came out late in the run and it was like, surprise. Like, it came out in 2009. Yeah. This was available to readers contemporaneous with reading Morrison's run.
Okay.
I see it, and I agree, Freya. You're right. It's like I now can kind of appreciate it more. It definitely, I feel like the first and third acts are the ones that like take from this the most. The second act is more like in Final Crisis, kind of inspired and what have you.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I like it. I'm excited.
So we've now talked about 6 of the issues, and there were a total of 12. So I'm just going to throw the other ones out for like truly, let's not make it deep. Lightning round reactions are the ones we didn't get a chance to talk about. So Batman 65, which we alluded to, a partner for Batman. Batman briefly replaces Robin with a trainee from abroad when Robin's leg is broken. Any other comments on that one?
There was one panel where like I can't, like, I don't know if I can frame it right, but it was like where Robin's just like, oh no, Batman will never think about me, and it's framed like the girl like in the 50s comics whose like boyfriend doesn't notice her, like Todd will never accept me because I have a bad face or whatever, like that
I've got a pimple. Todd,
yeah, it's like almost like a Liechtenstein painting or whatever. Yeah. It was funny.
All right,
no,
so
I mean, I think
ahead,
after I would just say after that gay panel, I could not, because I was laughing so hard and my tearing out. I just like, no.
Batman 86 we did discuss, which was Batman Indian Chief. Oh boy, from September 1954. Detective Comics 215, the Batman of All Nations from 1955, which we've alluded to but haven't discussed in full. I have to just say, as the resident 100% Italian on the panel, I have to really laugh at the mobster just impersonating the Italian Batman, like, and nobody, they're like, oh, it was the mobster, but also because this is around when my parents were kids. And they tell stories about how Italians were super, super discriminated against and you like couldn't even get a job or whatever. And so I had to almost like look at it with that lens of like, this seems really funny to us today, but like Italians were hated at that time. And to conflate with the Italian Batman with being the one that was the mobster and everything, it just, there's little layers, which I'm not prepared in the modern day to dissect. Any other comments on Detective Comics 2015 or 215?
These all just came to a blur, the international heroes. I was just like, all you people need to go to therapy for your self-esteem problems. Like every single one of you need to figure this out.
Oh, man. Detective Comics 235 we talked about, which is the first Batman from September 1956. World's Finest 89, we spoke about the Club of Heroes from July 1957. Detective Comics 247, the man who ended Batman's career by giving him a phobia of bats. Any comments on this one?
The literal note I wrote was, so many of these books are just messing with Batman's psyche, which I've already discussed. Like, it's just like, we want to make you feel weird in whatever way we can.
And then it was like, he was like, get away from me. Because every time there's like a bat, he's like a batarang. He's like, I can't throw it.
I can't throw the batarang.
Oh, no, I love he was Starman, and they were just, and Robin's like, yo, this costume sucks. Like, I do not like that we have done this change.
Yeah, everything is like and this is how fast, like, even the police commissioner changed the sign symbol and everything, and it became like a Starman and everything. I really like kind of, but at the same time, I also felt bad for him. Like, I didn't want to pick it as my weirdest because, like, it's kind of upsetting.
But also in modern continuity, isn't the thing kind of that like he was a little bit afraid of bats and like part of why he is Batman?
That's where the Batman begins.
Right. And so like I was telling my partner about these as I was reading them. And then when I got to this one, she was like, what the hell? Like, that's the whole point of Batman. Why don't you make him afraid of guns or like cars or shoes or something that would disable him from like doing anything? But no, make him afraid of bats. That's not going to stop Batman from doing anything.
There's an amazing joke in the Final Crisis tie-in of Batman that deals with this exclusively. It's just like, why are you scared of bats? What happens if you're scared of like snakes? It's just really solid. But yeah, I'm gonna just keep saying in Morrison's book. But yeah.
Well, I mean, this is why we read this first. So Batman 112, Am I Really Batman from December 1957 is his depressive episode. We talked about that. Batman 113, Batman the Superman of Planet X from February 1958. Harry discussed. Detective Comics 267. I'm surprised this one escaped without a discussion. Mm-hmm. It is Batman Meets Batmite from May of 1959.
That's the second time he wanted to spank someone.
He was going to spank that little Batmite and spank him hard.
I thought that book was fine, but it does introduce Batmite, who again has like a hellish, interesting kind of pop up in Grant Morrison's R.I.P. Arc, which kicks ass. Batmite's fun.
It made me. I did read that part of Morrison previously, and as soon as I read this, I was like, oh, so I did get to have that reaction one time.
Yeah,
same. Like I also read like R.I.P. before, so I kind of know about Batmite. I'm like, oh, this is where he started.
But also that like. That it doesn't really have an ending. It kind of is just like Batmite does enough stuff and they keep yelling at him and finally he's like, I'm gonna leave. And they're like, great. And then it just,
go away.
Go. We're done with you.
Yeah.
So then we have Batman 134, which I discussed, the Rainbow Creature from September 1960. Mm-hmm. We have Batman 156, Robin Dies at Dawn from June 1963, which is a very famous issue. We asked our friends to tell us some of their favorite Batman issues to get ready for this. And almost all of them picked this.
This one is like, I'm sorry not to just go full nerd again, but like when in Morrison's book, like there's a huge, this ties in a huge way. And I'm starting to turn the pages and I'm like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the thing that is a big deal. Like and again, the first act, this is where we're going to get to later. This is where Dr. Hurt gets introduced. There's some phrasing in this that plays out in the Batman R.I.P. near the end. There's a lot of stuff I recognize. Like this was a big one for the run. And it's just a good issue. One?
No. I was like, oh, it's probably going to be used somewhere.
Just
like that's what I'm saying. We should have read this probably afterwards. I don't know.
Well, it's just cool because it's like you see.
Well, I'm gonna come back.
Yeah.
Just remind me, and then I'll come back and read it.
Like, well, and also I feel like we're not Morrison experts except for maybe Harry. Well, you've read a lot of Morrison. I'm not a Morrison expert, and so I feel like to like bring any interesting discussion to discussing Morrison's Batman, like you have to know the influences a little bit. It's, like if we don't, we're going to be missing such obvious things that are interesting to
that's
discuss.
kind of my thinking.
And they're going to steal parts of us if we don't know this. Now that we know
lose
this,
ourselves.
they can't steal parts of us.
It's going to be
anymore.
funny because with each passing issue, we're going to have like bigger bags under our eyes and we're paying.
No, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. Like, the way Peter explained it, I'm like, I don't know about this anymore. There are comic book writers who are taking parts of me. I don't like this.
Well, there was one final casebook one, and none of us mentioned it, which is the Batman Creature from March 1964, where Batman is turned into a human/beast Godzilla creature by a criminal's animal evolving ray, but luckily he is able to be tempered by his love of the original Batwoman. So actually more of a King Kong. Any thoughts
that's
on
just
that?
That's like a Batman Incorporated thing, but I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it. It's just because she pops up,
Did you know, Freya, that there was a previous Batwoman?
I did, from that time. This is one of the first time there was actually a woman in these issues. Like, in none of the other issues, there is a woman either in the background or definitely not in the foreground. So
yeah, I mean, they're not even on, but every so often, if he's at a fundraiser or something, there'll be maybe one lady in the crowd. But we're not even talking women like being badly portrayed or not having lines. We're just talking about there are no ladies in these comic books.
Yeah, this is the same way the older Wonder Woman did not have a lot of dudes in them. It's separate. We're gonna keep these separate. I was like, oh, not necessarily, but okay.
I will make one final comment is I wanted to see what the other features were in these issues because some of them, this was only like 12 issues of a lead Batman feature and then there were other stories. So I tried to find a couple of them and what's really interesting is just the context of some of the other stories that were in them. Some of the backups in Batman have early Martian Manhunter stories and the theme of every story is he has to solve a crime because he's a detective. He's as his detective persona. But there's fire every time. One of them, there's like a fire eater because he's at the circus, and one time the criminal's at a fireworks factory, and one time there's an arsonist that's only setting fire to people whose last names are Jones, and it's just like so funny. But then the detective backups, actually, they had a couple of recurring stories, and one of them is this guy who's a TV host that exposes hoax. He's like a believe it or not host, but he also is kind of a detective because of that. And he does have a lady sidekick who is so much smarter than him in some of the stories. And I just thought it was funny because she's kind of like serving the Robin role, but to read that after these Batman stories where there's no women at all, and then read the story where there's like a named woman and she's the secondary character, I'm like, so it's not that it couldn't exist. They just, Bob Kane was uninterested in doing it in Batman in these particular stories. Again, we read 12 stories from 20 years of Batman, more than 20 years. So we could have missed every story that ever had a woman. Maybe Grant Morrison had reasons that they didn't pick any stories with women in them. So, hello.
Oh,
okay. Thought you
We're
lost
with you.
me
We're with you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We're here.
So we're not quite ready. I know you're like, okay, you've got me pumped. It's time for Morrison. Well, not quite. We're reading two things before we dive into Morrison, and they are also two things that are going to give us context. And they're things you can easily acquire both in digitally or physically or in piecemeal from something like Comixology. So the first one is the Tales of the Demon trade paperback. This has a number of issues in it that introduce Talia al Ghul and has some Ra's al Ghul material. There's 11 issues in it. We aren't necessarily going to go into full detail on every one of the issues, but there's 4 or 5 of them we're going to talk about pretty specifically. Specifically the ones that involve Talia and the ones that involve the Lazarus Pit. So that will be for our next discussion. And then also we're going to read the Birth of the Demon trade paperback. It is 3 original graphic novels, Son of the Demon, Bride of the Demon, and Birth of the Demon from 87, 90, and 92 respectively. And they set up a huge amount of the introductory material in this Morrison run. So if you don't care for any more background and don't want to hear us talk about it, that's fine. We'll see you in a couple of episodes as we dig into the beginning of Batman and Son. But if you do want to dig into some of the other things that have influenced Morrison, plus get a little bit of a pre-read of Batman, we are going to read through all of those stories. Harry, what say you about all that?
Honestly, I thought we should do this for research, the Golden Age comics, but this was like so much fun to read and so much fun to talk about. So I have a really good feeling about next week's books. Damian and Talia are a huge part of the Morrison run and also DC Comics as a whole. And like, this is where we're going to see that get started. And I hope we get the same thing from this that we got today. So I'm feeling good about this.
Freya, what about you?
Oh no, I'm excited, and the thing is, like, it, especially with knowing where Talia and Damien comes from, it will be kind of interesting to kind of do those pre-read before we can jump into Morrison's run proper. And I also want to mention that if you have Hoopla, which is something that you can get from your library, the digital collection of both of those books are available there. So you just have to, so
totally easy to do and free.
Yeah,
and I recommend DC Universe. The app is great for reading this book along with us because it's all there and it's super convenient and easy to use if you don't have the omnibuses or the trades. Although there are lovely omnibuses, you can actually see them wherever there we are, right there.
Yep.
They're great. So you got options and they're all good.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this casebook stuff is hard to track down. A lot of it is not available as digital singles on Comixology. Casebook itself is very out of print. It took some doing to get it available to us to read it. So unfortunately, this was not a good episode to follow along with. But all of these further episodes, it's going to be really easy to follow along, whether you do it on Hoopla, which also, I imagine, Freya probably has a lot of the individual trades of Morrison stuff in it as well.
Yes.
DC Universe, which is only, I think it's less than $10 a month. I'm international, so I can't have that. Or just buying things individually on Comixology. So there are many, many opportunities for you to catch up. And for me, I'm really interested because I felt like a lot of these Golden Age stories fed into that Adam West Batman that I know, because they're fighting on a giant cash register or they're fighting on giant diamond ring. It's like all very cartoonish. But then for me, the gap in Batman is 70s. Like I don't know what 70s Batman is at all.
Same.
My next awareness of Batman is post-crisis Batman. And this Tales of the Demon book starts in 1971 and ends in 1980. So this is going to be my first exposure ever to 1970s Batman, and I'm really excited for that.
He has a big hairy chest. He keeps his cowl on, but he doesn't have any shirt on.
We're gonna get some hot Batman.
I don't know about that.
well, folks, that is our introduction to our Crushing Comics reading club for Batman by Grant Morrison. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know you know us as X-Men readers, but Crushing Comics was always meant to be more, and this is our first time dipping our toe in the more. So if you've been listening to us with X-Men, we're really appreciative that you're willing to hang in with us for Morrison. And if you're new, welcome. We love comics, and we love crushing on them, and we love when they absolutely crush us, which some of these comics absolutely did this episode. So, at the end of our epic X-Men episodes, Freya has this thing that she says, which is what, Freya?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
No, I don't know if we're just going to co-opt that straight for Batman. It feels like we need a different tagline for Batman.
Yeah.
Any thoughts yet on our Batman tagline?
Oh, well, I have given it some thought, but nothing has come up yet. But I feel like as we are doing this, maybe something will come up. But for the time being, I'm going to leave you with Batman!
And leave suggestions in the comments if you want.
Yes, because we don't want to get any copyright flags on us from singing the Batman theme song over and over again. So,
it's so badly done. They're like, no.
They'll never know. It's just like an international Batman. It's it evades copyright because it's such a bad copy. So on the behalf of myself, Harry, who has inspired us on this read, Freya, my frequent partner in crime, this has been Crushing Comics and our first episode of our Crushing Comics book club for Grant Morrison's Batman. And until we get to talk to you again, we hope that you are well.
Bye.
Bye.